Hello everyone, so I'm here today to do my wrap-up for the month of March. As always, I will start with some statistics about the month. So I have read 12 books and 2,791 pages, so it's a little bit less than 100 pages per day, and the fact that it's 12 books means that the books are very small. The moods were mostly reflective, emotional and dark, which are kind of normal for me. The pace was medium and slow, mostly medium. The page number, as I said, very small books, so there were 17%. That means 2 books that were between 340 499 pages, and then all of the other ones were less than 300 pages. I would like that story graph divides less than 300 pages into like 200 to 300, 100 to 200, because I'm sure that these books are a lot smaller than 300 pages, like less than 200 pages, a lot of them. So I would have liked to see that, but unfortunately Storygraph doesn't have that. And then there is only one book that was non-fiction that I read, and the rest were fiction. Most of the things I read this month were literary. There were also a couple of LGBTQIA+ books and a couple of contemporary. And the rest is a little bit all over the place. The format, that's also something that I really like to see. So 67% is print, which means 8 books, and then 4 books I read in ebook. In terms of languages, I read 1 Portuguese book, 1 French book, and the rest were English books. And I know what you're thinking, I do not speak Portuguese, but it is close enough to Spanish that I can understand it if I read it. Kind of, so I did read 1 Portuguese book for reasons I will explain later, but yeah, most of it was English this month. And then the page count each day. There is a moment in the middle of the month that I read a lot because of the video I was doing for reading my favorite YouTubers' books. So I was reading Roshin's favorite books from last year, and I wanted to finish the video, so I made an effort to read extra in that part of the month. But the rest of the month I was actually quite busy and I was not able to read as much as I normally do, so a lot of the days I was reading less than 100 pages. So that translates in the number of pages I read this month as well. So with that said, let's go into the books that I read this month. The first one I actually reviewed on last month's wrap-up, and that's Le Racine du Yucca by Koulsy Lamko, and that's because I finished it like the last 20 pages on the first day of the month, so I don't remember anymore that much about it, but this was about a writer from, I think it was Chad, that moved to Mexico and his experiences in the different cultures. The next book is The Desert and the Drum by Mbarek Ould Beyrouk. I hope I didn't butcher that completely. But this one was for my Read Around the World project again, and this is about a woman in Mali, I believe. It's from the Tuareg in the Sahara, and she gets pregnant by someone that is not from the tribe, from a white man, I think, and that brings a lot of shame to the family. So her mother is trying to hide it, and she treats her very bad. So she runs away because she wants to take the child away from her, and it's about all that happens when she is pregnant and when she has the baby, and how traditions can crush people sometimes. The next set of books I read for reading Roshin's favorite books video, so if you are more interested in more of my thoughts, you can go to see that video. But yeah, I read On Gallows Down by Nicola Chester. This was a nature memoir, activist memoir, about the author trying to connect more with nature. I liked parts of it, I liked some of the ideas, but this was very, very, very rooted in a very specific part of the UK, and there was a lot of names being dropped all the time. So if you are from that part of the UK, I'm sure you will love this because it will be very nostalgic, but I have no idea. So for me, this was okay. I enjoyed some parts, but some other parts were just a little bit too much into the very specific location. The next one I read for that video was Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This was about two women that are married, and one of them is a sea scientist, a marine scientist, and she goes into this submarine trip that is supposed to be 3 weeks, but then it ends up in 6 months, and she comes back really changed, and her wife doesn't recognize her anymore, and there's really something very unsettling going on, that kind of surreal. And we are kind of exploring what that is, what's happening to her, and how the relationship developed and they got together. I have to say this was less gore than I was expecting, and that's good for me. But the characters are really unlikable, and I'm not sure I got their relationship. It didn't seem like a super healthy relationship, so for me this was I'm not sure I got the chemistry that I was hoping for, and like the development. Also the pace of this was kind of weird. Like, we know a lot of things at the beginning, and then we kind of are waiting for something to happen for the middle 100 pages or so, and I thought it was okay. Then I read The Betrayed by Reine Arcache Melvin, and this I think is my favorite from the ones I read for that video. This is about 3 people in Philippines during the regime. They are husband and wife, and then the sister of the wife. And the relationship is very troubled, and we follow all those troubles and also the political stance of each of them. And it's very, the family is very embedded in the politics and the social aspects of the life in Philippines, and so the relationships between the 3 characters are very, very engage into the conversation of the society in Philippines, and I really enjoyed it. I think much more it should get much more praise. It was not a perfect book for me, but I think it's a very good book, and I think more people should pick it up. Then I read The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea by Yukio Mishima, which is kind of a Japanese classic, and it's a very tiny book. It's about a teenager and that lives alone with his mom, and the mom gets a new boyfriend, and the boyfriend is a sailor, and it focuses a lot in the relationship between the sailor and this child. And this child is like 13, and he's very unsettling, let's say. Not as much as Earthlings, but on that vein. So just to get you an idea. I found this very unsettling, and I understand why she might like it, but it's not my cup of tea. And then the last one I read for that challenge was Keeping the House by Tice, and this one was about drug dealers in London, but they are from Turkey, so they kind of have that connection with Turkey. I like the discussion of that connection, but drug dealing is not my kind of thing, and I think that also, again, a lot of the people in this book were quite unlikable, so for me it was just not exactly for me, but there were parts of this book that I enjoyed. The next book I read, I have a full separate review of it, so you can also go check that out, but that's Open Water by Caleb Azumah Nelson, and this is about a couple, a love story. They are both into art, they are both artists. She's a dancer, he's a I think it was a painter. I don't remember anymore. And the language was really beautiful and really poetic, and I understand why so many people are taken away by the language, but the story and the topics were just very simple. Like, it's just a love story, it's nothing more than a love story. There's a few mentions of racism here and there, but it's basically just a love story, and I was expecting a little bit more from it, so I was a little bit disappointed, but I think that's also because of my expectations on the book. For Read Around the World project, I read Perfume by Olinda, Beja, and this is the book that I read in Portuguese. This is from São Tomé and Príncipe, and I could not find a book from São Tomé and Príncipe that was translated. Basically, it was really difficult for me to find anything, and these are short stories. Like, they are very short, and there's a lot of pictures, and this book is about 100 pages, so I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna try it. It's gonna be Portuguese, and I'm going to have to work a little bit harder because I don't speak Portuguese, but Portuguese is close enough to Spanish that, especially in written form, I can get the gist of things. And indeed, I think I did get most of the stuff. I had to look a word or two every story, but I think that's not too bad. So yeah, I'm quite proud to have gone through this. I think the writing was very beautiful, and I think that I have confirmed enough now that short stories are not for me. So I enjoyed it okay, but it's not my kind of thing, but it was really difficult for me to find a book from this country, so I just tried this, and I think some of the stories did give me a sense of the folklore of the island, and the like geographical stuff. There are a lot like fables, there are a lot about the mythology, a lot of them. So I enjoyed that, but yeah, again, it's not, I would have enjoyed a novel a lot more. The next book that I read is La Passion du Baobab by Adrienne Yabouza. And this is again a love story at its core, but it does have a lot about colonialism and that aspect of the life in this country, so I enjoyed it for that. Nothing particularly amazingly special, but I did enjoy it. The last two books I read together actually, and they have a lot of topics in common, so I just wanted to mention them in common. So one of them is The Marriage Portrait by Maggie, and the other one was The Furry and the Cries of Women, and they both deal with the inability to have children, and those children are wanted often for reasons that are not personal, but they are still wanted, and the struggle of infertility. So The Marriage Portrait, I read it because it's nominated for the Women's Prize for Fiction, and because I have read Maggie O'Farrell's Hamnet and I really enjoyed it, so I thought I will try this one as well, and I'm going to make a full review of this, so just to give you a heads up. But this one is about a couple in Italy in the 1560s, and she's kind of forced to marry him because he's a duke, and she's 15 or 16 when she gets married to the duke, and her mother is very fertile, so he wants a heir, so he thinks, okay, Lucretia is going to give me that heir, but there are rumors going on that he is infertile, so that makes things a lot more difficult, and we follow Lucretia, this girl, from before she gets married, all the reasons why she doesn't want to get married, and the way that she tries to stand up for herself, and then how she's married anyway, and how her life changes, and all the plots and things going on in the court, yeah, that's more or less what it is about. It's also a lot about painting, as the title might suggest. So Lucrecia does paint these miniature pictures, and she's very good at it, and she enjoys that a lot. But at some point, that's not deemed not acceptable for a duchess. And there is this other aspect that she's being painted for a portrait by this very famous painter, and that's kind of the present that Alonso the husband does to her, but she doesn't want to sit and be painted, and there are a lot of mentions to the painting and like the techniques and the want to paint a little bit, if you will, as The Girl with a Pearl Earring by Tracy Chevalier. Like that kind of, the painting aspect is in the middle of the story, but it's one big element of it, but it was done in a little bit less technical way. Like there is no discussion about the different techniques or the different pigments or stuff like that. There is just passing mentions of pigments and these portraits and these drawings, but there is not actually the more technical things that I would have enjoyed a little bit more. So overall, I enjoyed this. I don't think it's amazing. I think the writing in Hamlet was a lot better. I think this dragged quite a bit, and I felt like we knew how it was going to end pretty early on. So yeah, I enjoyed it, but nothing super special. And the other book I mentioned, the last book I read this month, was The Fairy and Cries of Woman by Cheryl Thomas, and I read this for the Read Around the World project. But this is, as far as I understand, set in a unknown place in Africa, because they mention they live in Campana. That's the name of the city they live in, and I tried to Google it and it doesn't seem to exist. So I think it's kind of made up. I have noticed that a lot of times in Africa they do that, like they set their stories in an imaginary country in Africa rather than particularly mention the place. But yeah, that's what it said, and it's about a couple, and we met them at the beginning of the relationship when they are about to get married, and everyone is opposed to that because they are from different tribes, but they marry anyway. And then we meet them 15 years later when they have a daughter that unfortunately dies when she's 13, and she really wants another children, but she seems to have miscarriage after miscarriage after miscarriage, and their relationship is completely shattered. He has several mistresses. He doesn't want to spend time at home, but he doesn't want a divorce either because of economical reasons, and she wants these children that don't come, and she ends up also having homosexual relationship that it's just against her, and there is all these different aspects of the relationship that is very, very interesting. I found the writing very contrived and very stiff, like it was trying to sound smart, when someone is trying to sound smart but it doesn't really work. It sounded a little bit like that, so the writing was not working for me, but the story was interesting. So yeah, that was I think a good book. And yeah, those are all the books that I read this month. Let me know if you have read anything, if you have enjoyed anything, if you want to pick anything up, and until next video, bye!